Hi, my name is Alan Ventura. Since I've turned 21, I've had the same conversation over and over again with a bunch of my underage coworkers. And it goes a little something like this. Hey Alan, if I give you money to buy me a six pack of beer, could you do that for me? And the answer is always a big fat no. For legal purposes, of course. But 18-year-old me shakes his head in disappointment. Not cool, man. You were in their shoes before. You know that they deserve it. And as a 22-year-old, I kind of agree with 18-year-old me. Today, I'm going to tell you why I think the legal drinking age should be lowered to 18. And by the end of the speech, I hope that you agree with me that the legal drinking age of 21 is a bit arbitrary and should be reconsidered. So, let's dive into the argument that everybody seems to be having about this topic, and that is if I can enlist in the military at the age of 18 and choose to die for my country, why can't I share a pint of beer with my friends? Now, this is an argument that I feel a lot of people feel very, very strongly about, and I also agree with them. I think people should be allowed this freedom. I believe that if any specific group of people from the 18 to 20-year-old age demographic should be allowed to consume alcohol, it should be our military men and women. So let's think about it like this. Imagine an 18-year-old gets deployed overseas to Europe, a continent whose minimum drinking age varies from 16 to 18 years of age, right? So they could learn how to legally consume alcohol responsibly for 2 years. At the age of 20, return to the United States, and they would be denied the purchase of alcohol. If what our federal laws are saying is that a 20-year-old soldier cannot handle the consumption of alcohol, then maybe we should all be advocating that the enlisting age in the United States should also be raised to 21 years old as well. Now, this may not seem like an important issue, but when it affects such a large amount of people, it becomes a problem. According to a poll conducted by StatisticBrain.com, it shows that 20% of our soldiers in the United States are under the age of 21. That's roughly 285,000 soldiers, a large chunk of our military that are not deemed responsible enough to consume alcohol. A large chunk of soldiers that, if we raise the enlist age to 21, we would lose a large amount of our national defense. Now that I've talked about underage drinking in the military, I'll move on to the concerns that most people probably have, and that's of drinking and driving. So, the main question we have to ask ourselves here is, would drinking and driving increase if we lowered the drinking age? In my personal experiences as a teen driver taught by my parents, I was taught that drinking and driving should never be an option after a night out. And if for any reason I needed to be picked up, they would I just give them a call. They would pick me right up, or take an Uber, take a taxi, stay at a friend's house. Just don't drink and drive. Um, I think that good parenting is a fundamental asset to ensure that new drivers do not drink and drive. I do recognize that not everybody grows up with having good parenting, responsible parents, and I do recognize that there's a bigger risk as far as a lack of judgment from an 18-year-old versus a 21-year-old as far as driving goes. But I feel that is not something that cannot be easily ingrained as long as there are clear consequences in order. So now that I've kind of covered the apprehensions of drinking and driving, let's talk about if the rate of alcohol consumption would lower if we were to raise the drinking age. Now, in my personal experiences in high school, I and a handful of parties that I attended, I realized whenever I went to the parties, there was always alcohol everywhere, and it was just so surprising to me because as like a 19-year-old kid, I was never able to get my hands on alcohol. It just wasn't possible. Um, so and as I grew up, I realized that it was one of three things. It was either the kids had cool parents, they had a cool older brother or sister, or they went to that gas station around the corner that just never seems to ID. I guess they just always forget, something like that. Um, what I'm trying to get at here is that I think at whatever age you decide is best for legal drinking, people can get their hands on it one way or another, regardless of what the law says is right. Another topic I'd also like to talk about is the beaming question. Why is the legal age 21? What does it mean? Why such a weird number? Well, in 1984, Congress passed the Federal Underage Drinking Act, with, with which withholds transportation funding from states if they do not have a minimum legal drinking age of 21. Basically, they said if you don't want your highways to suffer, you better hike up that drinking age. Because most of the states regulated their own drinking age laws. Some of them were usually 18 to 19 years old for the minimum drinking age. Um, so if I just don't understand why we're still following a reform act that was passed over 30 years ago just because we're scared of our highways becoming run down. The main reason as to why the act was passed had to do with a pressing issue in the 80s that is no longer a real issue at this current point in time. So maybe it's time that we rethink this act and come to a more mutual and beneficial understanding. Another point a lot of people tend to make is that the reason the minimum illegal drinking age cannot be 18 is because the brain is not yet fully developed. However, according to recent studies from the University of California, the brain is not fully developed until the age of 25, and nobody seems to be pressing to raise the age to that. It doesn't make sense to have a 3 year difference, 18 versus 21, for a legal drinking age if the brain is still not fully developed for another 4 years, 21 versus 25. Now, maybe instead of pressing to lower the age or raising the age, is there a way that we can reach a mutual understanding, some sort of middle ground? Instead of completely, legalizing all types of alcohol for 18-year-olds and up, what if we legalize certain alcohols for certain age groups? While I do advocate for lowering the minimum drinking age, this other option is something that I can get behind. So it could be a little something like this. If you're 18-year-old and up, you can drink beer. Once you turn 21 and up, you can drink liquor. Let me explain why I think that. So the amount of alcohol that is contained in a beer or liquor drink is measured in a percentage known as alcohol by volume, or ABV for short. The alcohol by volume of many common beers like Bud Light, Miller Lite, Michelob Ultra caps out at around 5 ABV. Nothing too major. You have like 4 or 5 cans of beer, 4 or 5 bottles, and that might get you intoxicated depending on how fast you're drinking it. However, when we move on to liquor, it gets a little bit interesting. The ABV of liquor can range from 12% to as high as 60%, depending on what type of spirit you're drinking, even higher in some other harder drinking countries. This means that 1 to 2 drinks containing maybe like just whiskey or just vodka or just tequila can get you way more intoxicated much faster compared to 4 or 5 drinks of just beer, as well as depending on how fast you drink them. This is something I didn't learn until I was 21, and it's something that I think we should realize. Now, I have a chart here that shows the amount of ER visits from underage drinking and all other drugs. So you have LSD, PCP, ecstasy, methamphetamine, heroin, cocaine, and marijuana. Now, marijuana caps out at about almost 125,000 ER visits. But underage drinking can go over almost 200,000 ER visits a year. Like I said, this is something I didn't learn until I was 21. I only had some experience of drinking beer, never liquor. In short, maybe if beer was introduced sooner to teenagers, they would learn how to be more responsible with it for when they are of legal age to buy liquor. In summary, I know that the minimum drinking age is in place to protect young teens from suffering fatalities that they otherwise wouldn't suffer if they were a bit older. However, I feel like 3 years doesn't make that much of a difference in judgment. I feel very strongly about the fact that if you can handle fighting for your country and making the ultimate sacrifice, you should be able to consume alcohol. It's the very least we as a nation can do for our troops. Additionally, drinking and driving has less to do with the age at which alcohol is acceptable and more so lies with people being responsible drivers and in good parenting. The most important thing to remember here is that clear consequences, boundaries, and responsibilities need to be enacted in order for our roadways to be a safer place for our entire nation. Finally, We need to take into consideration that the legal drinking age does not necessarily prevent minors finding other ways to acquire alcohol or consume alcohol. This is an issue I feel that needs to be cracked down hard upon, whether it be establishing harder consequences for being underage and caught, or we could simply lower the minimum age to 18. Additionally, if all other arguments and debates fail, I feel that maybe the best solution is to just limit beer to 18 and up and liquor to 21 and up, and as a safety precaution to unsuspecting novice drivers. It's our job as a nation to make sure that our population is cared for in a proper and justified way. We shouldn't be making certain demographics feel like they're lesser than others. The minimum drinking age is a timeless yet relevant topic that needs to be reconsidered. I hope that in the clear future, as a nation, we can come to a reasonable understanding about establishing a drinking law that is not only responsible but also fair.